With the January 24 session kickoff just over 2 weeks away, the governor, the GOP, and the DFL caucuses are ramping up to move swiftly into what some believe will be a short session. We hear that often. But will the legislature support a pro-jobs, pro-business agenda as we all work to move the state's economy forward? Will a deal on a bonding bill be reached, and what projects will be included? Is tax reform on the agenda this year? What pitfalls await legislative leaders as they work to support positions within their respective parties, caucuses, and with Governor Mark Dayton? And of course, will there be a Viking Stadium? So to learn more about all of these things, we are very pleased to have with us legislative leadership from the Minnesota House and Senate. So I will first introduce House Speaker Kurt Zellers. House Speaker Kurt Zellers represents House District 32B, which encompasses Maple Grove and Osseo. He was first elected in the 2003 special election. He served as Assistant Majority Leader in the House in 2005, 2006, and as Assistant Minority Leader from 2007 through 2009. Elected by his peers in the Minnesota House, Zellers was confirmed as Speaker on January 4th, 2011. His legislative accomplishments include co-authoring the legislation which finally realized the long-term pursuit to build a new hospital in the northwest suburbs, and that Maple Grove Hospital opened in December of 2009. In 2006, he was also the chief author of House File 1, greatly strengthening Minnesota's sex offender laws. He's worked previously in public affairs communications for more than a decade, primarily in the upper Midwest. His time includes work for Twin Cities advertising and public relations firms. He's conducted media training, speech coaching, and crisis management for all levels and aspects of government in the public and private sector. So Speaker Zellers was born and raised in North Dakota. We won't hold that against you. And attended the University of North Dakota, where he received his BA in political science. He lives in Maple Grove with his wife, Kim, and their 2 children. So please join me in welcoming Speaker Zellers. We also have with us, happy to have with us this morning, House Minority Leader Paul Thiessen. Representative Paul Thiessen represents District 63A, which includes Minneapolis and Richfield. He graduated magna cum laude from Harvard University in 1989. After college, he attended the University of Chicago Law School and graduated with honors in 1992. From 1993 to 2012, Thiessen worked for Briggs & Morgan as a litigator. He was a shareholder at the firm until 2002, when he stepped down upon taking office in the House of Representatives. He now practices law at Lindquist and Venom. Until his election in 2002, he served as chair of Briggs & Morgan's Pro Bono Committee and was an active participant in programs intended to increase the availability of legal representation to those in our community who cannot otherwise afford a lawyer. Thiessen served on the board of the Minnesota Justice Foundation and founded a program for volunteer lawyers called Access for Persons with Disabilities to increase the availability of legal representation to persons with disabilities in the Twin Cities. He has worked with the Minnesota Advocates for Human Rights to represent refugees seeking asylum in the United States. In partnership with the Chrysalis Center for Women, Thiessen has represented women seeking order for protection from abusive partners. In 2006, he was named the Twin Cities 40 under 40 top professionals by the Twin Cities Business Journal, and he was elected to serve as the House Minority Leader in 2010. So please join me in welcoming Representative Paul Thiessen. We also have with us this morning Senate Majority Leader Dave Senjum. Senator Dave Senjum represents District 29, which includes all of Dodge County and the north and westerly portions of Olmsted County, including half of Rochester. Senator Senjum's public involvement includes 11 years on the Rochester City Council, 4 years as park board member, and 6 years as a member of the Olmsted County Environmental Commission. He spent 16 years on the Minnesota Emergency Response Commission and 4 years in the Minnesota OSHA Advisory Committee. In November of 2006, he was elected by his caucus to serve as the Senate Republican Minority Leader. As Minority Leader, Senjum led the Republican caucus to the majority in the 2010 election, a significant achievement in the political history of the state Senate Minnesota. In his first year in the majority, he served as the assistant to the Senate Majority Leader plus chair of the Capital Investment Committee and served on the Higher Education, Rules, Taxes, and Transportation Committees. He was recently elected to lead the Republican majority for the 2012 session. Please join me in welcoming Senator Leader. Okay, and we also have with us this California, Senator Terry Bonnet. She represents District 43 in the Minnesota Senate, which includes parts of Minnetonka, Plymouth, and Medicine Lake. She began her 20-year business career working in the family business of Jackson Graves, a women's clothing company, before moving on to Tonka Toys as manager of promotional services, and later serving as vice president and general manager for the computer products division of the publicly held and Plymouth-based Navarre Corporation. Now serving as deputy leader of the Senate DFL caucus, Senator Bonnet has focused much of her legislative work in the areas of education and structural government reform and design. Please join me in welcoming Senate Deputy Minority Leader Terry Bonnet. Okay, thank you. And also I just want to, so folks know, I know that Representative Thiessen needs to leave today a little bit early, so we will continue. So it's not like he got frustrated and just left. He has an appointment. He has an appointment that he has to be at. But we are sure that Senator Bonnet that can continue to carry that, or we could, ask the panel, what do you think that Representative Thiessen thinks? So we'll decide how we want to handle that. So let's go ahead and start. It's amazing that just 14 days away, or I don't know, is it 14? I'm sure you guys know the minutes and hours, but it's coming upon us quickly. Jobs and the economy ranks very high on the minds of Minnesotans as we go into the 2012 legislative session. On Wednesday this week, Governor Dayton and DFL legislative leaders unveiled the jobs plan that includes targeted tax credits, a $3,000 tax credit for each Minnesotan hired in 2012, assuming that they come from one of three categories, which I believe was those who are unemployed, veterans, and those who recently graduated from tech school or college. The proposal also included a $750 million bonding bill, which included Southwest Transit, which we are very appreciative of here at Twin West, and a sales tax charge for internet sales. So give us your take on the governor's job plans, and let us know why you think this is something that we'll be able to move forward this session or we won't, and why. And so, Senator Senjum, do you mind if we start with you?
No, not at all. That's why I came. Not necessarily be first. Let me just offer that it's good to be here. It's kind of like going to the top of the mountain, I guess, to come to Twin West. I'm going to go home to Rochester and tell John Wade, our chamber person, is going to have to kind of kick it up a little bit, because this is an impressive group, and it's good to be here. But to the question, these things kind of roll out pretty quickly, as I'm sure all of us are working to put our caucuses together again. I mean, maybe more than some of them, and as we think about going forward, lots of things to think about, obviously, all of us, but I think these things are fair issues to bring forward. In the end, you have to pay for them, and so that gets to be the I think the principle kind of does it go this way or that way on any of these, and so I'll just say they'll all get a long look. I do chair the bonding committee, at least so far, and continue on, and maybe that's I'm not sure, I thought it was 775. Maybe that's a little strong for us. We've already bonded for 497 in the previous session, and just thinking collectively through the biennium what that bonding number ought to be, it probably, at least from the standpoint of the get-go, is going to be a little strong for us. But the governor did his job. He presented his perspectives and views. It's our job to take and chug and churn on them a little bit and see whether or not we can make anything happen out of them. If not, we better offer some alternatives. So just kind of looking ready, looking forward to the session, and as it's been said, it's going to be probably a short one. It's a matter of how much we can digest during that brief period.
Representative Thiessen, can you comment on that jobs plan that was unveiled this week?
Sure, and I also want to thank you for having me today, and it's always good to come out and speak with you. I think, first of all, I'm pleased that we were able to present a plan to the people of Minnesota on jobs, getting people back to work and into careers that are going to last them for a long time, because I think that needs to be the primary focus of this legislative session. And instead of focusing on how long we're going to be there, I just hope that we are there long enough to get that work done, because that's what the people of Minnesota want us to focus on. And I think we can do it in that time period if we're focusing on jobs and not focusing on other issues like constitutional amendments and other things that will distract us from our main agenda, which is our economy and getting people back to work. I think there's some really exciting ideas in what we rolled out on Tuesday. I think there's going to be other ideas that are going to come to the table as well, and we're very willing to work across the aisle to make sure that we're getting people back to work. The thing that I'm most excited about, I want to make two other comments on the jobs proposal. This tax credit idea really, I think, is a strong idea for two reasons. One, I do think it'll get an incentive for businesses, small businesses, because that could make a difference in whether they're going to hire someone, the amount of the tax credit. And even large businesses, I was speaking to one of our biggest companies, one of the executives yesterday, and one of the points he was making is that, what they're looking at is which states can you land more jobs. And Minnesota is a good place to land jobs when they're thinking of expanding, and this may tilt the balance in favor of doing that. If they're going to hire 50, 80, 100 people, that starts to add up. The other thing that it does, though, is we know structurally and long term, there's certain groups that are really falling behind. There are recent college graduates, there are the long-term unemployed, who are really falling out of the job market. And one of the things that this proposal does is get those folks an advantage of moving back into the job market. Because if we lose them for too long, they're really set back for a career and for a lifetime. And that's one of the real dangers, I think, of what's happened in this recession. So I think there's some really good, strong ideas in there that we're excited about getting people back to work. The bonding bill, I want to just say one thing about that. It's often talked about as a jobs bill. I think that's not the way to think about it. The most important thing about our bonding bill is that it actually invests in infrastructure, schools, roads, bridges, those things that allow our economy to work long term. And that's what we need to keep the focus on. And as a result of that, we are going to put a lot of people back to work, but I don't think we should just see it as government spending money to put people to work. The most important thing about the bonding bill is that it's actually like the Southwest corridor, Southwest line. It will actually improve our economy for the long term and make those infrastructure investments that we need to make. And as the addition of having jobs come as a result of that is great and is real and is important. But it's not the sole purpose for doing it, and I hope that we view our bonding bill from that perspective.
So, Speaker Zellers, I know that you and the Republican caucus have been meeting with business owners and community leaders to gather ideas on how to help grow jobs and the economy. So, given what you've heard and what the governor and DFL leadership came out with this week, do you see some synergies there, or what?
Sure, and thank you very much, and welcome to my colleagues. Welcome to Terry and I's house. Not only, though, do you get a good, thoughtful conversation, probably the most intriguing that you'll have in a Chamber of Commerce meeting, but you get a deck of cards to play with, which in long sessions, very valuable. And now that we actually have winter, you have a window scraper. I mean, this is a utilitarian caucus and a meeting here. So I have
valued at under $5.
Yeah, and it was provided by Finance and Commerce and our friends at Grand Casino. Some of the things that we've seen, and when asked about the bonding bill, I said that zero is probably, not definitely, but probably too little, and $1 billion is way too much. So I think that kind of shocks the field. It's no secret that we don't believe that a government program stimulates the economy. The people in this room do. Small business owners, the hardworking women and men that go to work every day, that have a product, have a service, have built a business. In many cases, many of you I know personally in this room, started from very little, left your very comfortable company, went out on your own. That's what brings our economy back. A bonding bill, yes, will provide some infrastructure needs. I totally agree with Paul, Minority Leader Thiessen, we should be respectful, that there are some infrastructure needs. That should be our first focus. That's what the bill looked like last year. And in the House, it takes 68 votes to pass the bill. We had 108 or 109 votes for the bonding bill. It was as vanilla as the wall over there, but it got a lot of support because it was good infrastructure, roads, bridges. If we focus on that, I think there will be probably a decent chance to pass a bonding bill. If we get into sheet music museums and local interest projects that maybe are nice to have, but really not necessary, then I think our chances diminish.
Thank you. Senator Bonhoeff, can you comment on that jobs proposal that came out and how you see that moving forward this session?
Thank you, and welcome to all of my friends and colleagues. And it is nice to be able to speak in the place that I do call home. And I will say, though, that I went down and talked to your chamber last session, too. So you have a nice group there, too, Senator Senjum. Okay. I was pleased with the governor's job proposal in that what it did is it put the spotlight on jobs. And I think right out of the gate, that is what we ought to be focused on. We have a semblance of emerging from this recession. I think we want to do all that we can to make sure that we are continuing to focus on the importance of that. You know, some people will say, well, giving a tax credit isn't what's going to cause a business to hire. Consumer demand is going to cause a business to hire, and we all know that. But yet, if you're weighing this option or that, perhaps it does give you that little impetus. But again, one of the groups that I'm most concerned about are our young adults. I actually have 4 kids between the ages of 21 and 27, and right now, thankfully, the 3 who need to be employed are employed, but it wasn't easy, and it took months and months and months. And I have watched not just my kids, but so many young people coming out of college thinking, now what? You know, you promised me if I worked hard, I would have a career, and yet they're coming out at the toughest time that we can ever remember. So again, will that $3,000 credit get a young person a job? I don't know, but what it does do is it tells our business community, think about them. They're important. They are our future. And so with regard to the bonding bill, I have 2 things to say about that. One is I'm glad Senator Senjum and Representative Zellers are here to say on the record that if that Southwest Transitway is, and I believe it is, in the governor's bonding bill, that it's staying in the governor's bonding bill, and that we're passing it by session end. So I do ask that they commit to that at this table
We'll get
today.
to that question.
Thank you. And then the other thing I wanted to mention about the bonding bill that hasn't yet been said is the importance of investing not just in roads, bridges, and infrastructure, which is critically important, and we're lucky with interest rates historically low that this is the opportunity to make sure we take advantage of that, but also the importance of the investment in higher ed. Because again, if we think long term, higher ed holds the key to our future, making sure that our youngest learners from early childhood through post-secondary are equipped to compete and be world leading. So let's not forget higher ed as we evaluate that bonding bill. Thank you.
Senator Bonhoeff, this next question, I'm going to start with you as well. You know, I joke, but it is great that we have a surplus and we don't have to deal with a deficit this year. But we do have, looking out, we still have a deficit projected. And so, you know, what are the changes that need to take place to really stabilize what has felt like just ebbs and flows? And so, you know, related to spending, taxing, government reform. And, you know, we asked the question, but you know, do we have a spending problem? Do we have a revenue problem? Is it a combination of both? And what do we do to resolve that? And
that was a
we'll start with
softball.
you.
Thank you, Danette. So, you know, I have been a strong advocate for tax reform. And I was so proud of this chamber when the question was asked on last month's business ballot about, you know, should we actually use this session to do significant tax reform? And we said 100% yes. I mean, come on, that's pretty powerful. And so long term, we have to make these changes. We cannot depend on the vagaries of the economy to say whether Minnesota is going to go forward or whether we're going to stand still or worse yet, fall behind. We have to do the things that are very tough, like expand the base of the sales tax, eliminate some of the corporate taxes, make sure we have a climate where businesses thrive, where we get new businesses, and where we can grow. And we aren't going to do that until we make those very tough choices with regard to tax policy. And so as the Republicans speak about Reform 2.0, again, I would challenge them to ask them, but how about the big one? How about the revenue side? Are you willing to tackle tax reform? And I think that tackling that issue can go a long way towards stability in our financial future.
So, Senator Senjum, do you think realistically that is something that we can, I mean, it always seems like tax reform, well, we can't do it this year, we have a deficit. Well, we can't do it this year, we have a surplus. So, is it something that we can really start to seriously look at? And I guess I should back up and start, you know, do you agree that tax reform is something that we need in this state?
Well, boy, that's softer than her question.
All right, I am making these harder.
You got to toughen these up. Well, obviously the answer is yes, and you know, maybe the classic example, you know, go back to the Delta Northwest thing, and you know, I don't know all the factors, I wasn't there, but very simply, if you can go to Georgia at a 6% corporate income tax rate, or you can stay here and have your headquarters at a 9.8% rate. I don't know, kind of a pretty easy answer to that, I think, and just kind of maybe going back to the initial question of Senator Bonhoeff. You know, and I heard it this morning. I mean, businesses, there's capital out there. There's just this confidence factor. You know, what's tomorrow going to bring? And whether it's at the federal level or at the state level. And I think our job is to create some level of confidence in terms of the business community, that they have some sort of assurance for somewhat of a long-term basis, at least as long as they can trust the legislature, and that may not be very long, but some level of confidence that if they invest, they're not going to, for instance, run into, as we frankly fought off last year, some very, very major tax increases that were proposed by the governor. Tax increases that would have literally taken us to one of the most highly taxed states in the country. Well, you just can't compete that way, both nationally and internationally. So I think it's up to us to, you know, we've got a little bit of surplus. Let's take it easy. Let's be a little deliberate. I remember so well in my first year, 2003, it was all through that time up to 2007. It's about, you know, deficit, and frankly has been almost since that. But we did have 2007 where we had a $1 billion surplus, and that was spent in a heartbeat. And come 2008, there it is, $925 million deficit again, and it's continued to grow at least until this year again. So this is a volatile thing. Let's just be a little careful. Yeah, we need to do tax reform. Senator Ortman has been proponent, along with the rest of the members of our tax committee, on the business tax, the statewide business tax elimination of that. And let's, you know, maybe can't do it all in 1 year, obviously can't, but let's just start that journey. So things like that, I think, are important. We've got to have a goal. We've got to have our eyes on that goal, and we simply have to be moving towards making a better business climate in Minnesota. When your rate's 44th in the country, 50 being worse, you got to do better than that, and we can.
So, Representative Thiessen, you know, we hear a lot with the taxes. We should increase this tax, decrease this tax. I mean, is it really just moving the dial up and down, or is it really full tax reform that we need to be looking at? And how can the legislature move that forward politically? It just seems like just such a difficult thing to move forward. And would your caucus support it?
So, I'll agree with everybody. Absolutely, tax reform is needed, and we've known that for a long time. But I think, your question raises some good points, Jeanette. So, the things that I would say, first of all, as we look at this budget deficit, it really is illusory surplus, because we are facing $1.3 billion of deficit coming just next January, a year from now, and that doesn't count the over $2 billion that was borrowed from our schools and some additional borrowing that we've done over several years. So we're not out of the hole yet, and so I agree with Senator Senjum. The money that is in this current budget surplus, temporary surplus, we should start paying back some of those debts that we owe in the past. And as if I look at structural reform of our budget, I think the first rule number one, is we shouldn't borrow anymore, especially this tobacco bond borrowing that we did, where we actually, for the first time in state history last year, deficit spent for current operations. We issued money that to pay for about $650 million in current spending, and we're going to be paying about $1.2 billion for that because we put it on the credit card. So the reality is we have a little money in our savings account, but it's because we maxed out our credit card. We should all agree up here that we will never, ever, ever do that again. That will start to get us on the road to structural stability. The second thing I would say is there is an issue of which tax it is, because what we've seen as a result of last year's budget, and you've probably seen it in your businesses and in your homes, is that property taxes across the state are going up substantially. And there is a direct correlation. It's not all at the state, but it's also not all at the local level, and certainly not all at the local level. Decisions made last year, like to eliminate the homestead, the market value credit, and other decisions, drove up property taxes across this state. And maybe not as much right here, but in greater Minnesota, in ag land, you're seeing double-digit increases, businesses double-digit increases, and even here in many cities in the metro area, you're seeing double-digit increases in certain classifications of property. That doesn't make sense if we want to make our businesses competitive, because the #1 tax far and away on businesses is the property tax, and mostly the local property tax, not the state general property tax. And so that's the second thing that I would say that we should focus on as we think of long-term, how we structure it. We need to keep not just our own state, the four corners of our state budget intact, but also look at the impacts that's going to have on other government spending at the local level. And is it really fair to be raising property taxes at that level on businesses around the state? Going forward, I do think that we should get after a broad reform in the tax system. And I'll just say this: the last time we did a broad reform in the tax system was when we had control of the government. We had the state government with a governor and a legislature of the same party. And that, I think, is one of the ways next year that we are going to be able to do some true fundamental tax reform.
I think we just got Representative Thiessen's prediction on the elections next year. So,
What was your question again?
Do you want to get into elections, or do you want to stay in it? On tax reform, I mean, why is it so hard?
And Paul's going to leave now. No. And many of you in this room know I'm kind of a one-trick chihuahua on this. I've authored, I've co-authored several different iterations of tax reform. You want to do the most to help businesses in this state. You go and ask them, what would it be that we could do from state government standpoint to help you with your tax burden? Two very, very simple things. Help small business owners with their property taxes, bring down our corporate tax rate of 9.8%. We are a outlier, not just across the country, but across the world with a 9.8% tax rate. How do you do it, Danette? And not bragging, because I gave up all the bills. You do it very slowly, but you've got to start. If it's a half a point a year, if it's even a quarter point a year. I had both versions, a point a year, and then I had to rip it out by the roots to just eliminate the 9.8%. That one, really hard. Half a point a year, even a point a year, you start the process. And that is what will give business owners that are sitting on capital, many of you in this room who know someone, especially in lending, who have a lot of cash on hand that are just waiting for stability in the economy. That will bring stability in the economy. Going up, raising taxes, yeah, I would agree with Paul. If you give one party control of all the levers of government, you're going to see some tax policy. And I will bet you my left arm that it won't be going south. It'll be going north. So I think those are the two simple ways. The market value homestead credit, let's talk real numbers. It was an $89 million program. We've been promising local governments, we're going to give you this program, we're going to give you this relief. My city of Maple Grove, I don't think we ever received it. I'm meeting with Mayor Stephenson this afternoon. I'll make sure and confirm. We eliminated a program that we in the state government, just like the federal government, wasn't fulfilling the promise on. Rather, we thought direct relief from the state of Minnesota to the property tax owner with property tax, the PTR program is what it's called, is a much better way and far more transparent way. Unfortunately, some municipalities around, whether it be counties or cities, have taken the $59 million, so you netted out $89 million program, backfilled with $30 million for individual property tax relief. That number is over $500 million. Now, I'm not sure, not a very smart kid from the farm, but I'm not sure that $59 million equates to $500 million in property tax case. I could be real skeptical and cynical and say that maybe, just maybe, some folks are using it as an excuse to raise property taxes instead of reforming their budgets, looking at areas where maybe they're duplicating with a neighboring county where they could partner, any number of things. But I wouldn't want to accuse anyone in local government of doing that, so I'll refrain. Not all levies have been certified yet, so some of these early on numbers that we've been hearing have not actually come to fruition when those budgets have finally been certified. So I will remain hopeful and optimistic that some of those numbers that we're hearing will come down. In some cases, we've seen them actually go below. So some folks in the local level have cut property taxes. But that's, and I'm not going to touch elections. A year is an eternity in this business.
So
Can I just go ahead? Because I'm sorry, but we do get this attack on local governments from the Republicans all the time, and they're now comparing apples and oranges with this. Oh, 400 million in relief, 90 million minus 30 million is all we really cut. The fact is they booked nearly 500 million in savings in the state budget as a result of this. So I think if you were going to be talking about math, we actually ought to be talking about real math. And the fact of the matter is this program never cut money to homeowners. That's the thing that the Republicans have not understood with this. This is direct property tax relief to homeowners. That's what the market value property tax credit was. It was money off your property tax bill directly to you. So this argument that it's like LGA in some sense is simply not right. School districts never were cut. They were always fully paid under this program. In the cities, 84% of cities, and almost every year of this program, never saw a reduction in their aid. So the idea that this was a program that was never funded is simply flat false. This was clearly property tax reductions that were taken away from Minnesota homeowners. And the worst thing about it from your perspective, it clearly shifts, when they have to backfill this money, it clearly shifts the property tax burden to businesses and to small businesses. None of those facts are disputable. Let's have an honest discussion about that. If we're going to actually reform government, I think the first place we ought to start is actually agreeing on what the real facts are, and those are the real facts.
Senator Bonoff wants in on this.
Thank you. No, not on this, actually.
Oh,
Just
okay.
same question. Same question, but just wanted to point to the political challenge we have, because I began the conversation by saying that if we're going to do real tax reform, we have to deal with expanding the base of the sales tax. We have one of the most narrow sales tax in the country, and we don't, do anything on services. So not business to business, but consumer services. So you just listened to 3 other leaders speak about the importance of tax reform, and particularly Speaker Zellers and Senator Senjum only talked about reducing business taxes, which I also talked about. That is important, but we have to talk about both sides of the ledger, because that's how accounting works. You have the one side and the other side. We have to also be willing to have the tough discussion about doing things that are unpopular, like expanding the base of the sales tax.
So I see that Representative Thiessen, are you getting ready to go? Okay, so you just gathered your papers. I have a question I definitely want to get to. So we talked about the bonding bill a little bit. I want to really narrow the focus of that and just to make this kind of a quick round robin. So your caucus's position on what the size of the bonding bill should be, and whether or not your caucus supports having Southwest Transit as a part of that bonding bill. So Representative Thiessen, we'll start with you.
Sure. So $775 million is what is paid for in our current forecast. So that's what's expected to be had in our current forecast. I think that's the right number to look at for that, and absolutely on the Southwest Corridor.
Great, thank you.
Well, from my perspective, and I think probably a vast majority of my caucus.
Okay, thank you. Speaker Zellers? Yes. You are not getting out of this question.
No, I was just asking Paul. There's a significant delegation from Minneapolis and St. Paul that may have a train that they're interested in as well. So I just curious.
Minneapolis likes our train.
And I've actually was out on a tour with a number of folks in this room to tour the Southwest Corridor project. One of the things, and I will be first to admit, I was not an advocate for transit when I first got to the legislature. Maple Grove, and yes, I am bragging about my hometown here. Maple Grove has one of the best bus rapid transit. In fact, I think we can prove on paper it's the best bus rapid transit in the state. And it actually will pay for itself. before we build anything new, I think we need to look at our commitments from the federal government. If anyone in here thinks that the federal government is going to be good for all of their money that they promised to you, please see me afterwards. I've got beachfront property in North Dakota to sell you. But that being said, it is a very good project business-wise. I think it's probably the best one to set up if we could have started. Bill Schreiber, close your ears. If we could have started with this project, I think we would have had a lot less animosity with trains, North Star, you know, the Central Line. If we would have started with this line, it probably would have been the best thing for the state and for, especially for rail transit. Unfortunately, now we have some bad examples that I don't know are going to maybe make it a lot harder for us to include this in the bill.
And bonding bill, you said between 750 and $1 billion somewhere?
I said zero is probably not
zero
enough.
is not enough. Oh.
You know, I think until you know, and we had floods, we've had tornadoes, we've had all kinds of natural disasters. If you prescribe this number has got to be here, you then set yourself in, not to sound like a typical politician, but if we have a tornado that goes through, you know, northern Minnesota and floods in the southeast again, you say $200 million and there's $500 million worth of relief. I think there's a lot of people around the state who look at us and say, what a bunch of irresponsible jerks, they're forgetting about us.
Senator Senjum, ballpark number on the bonding bill and Southwest Transit?
Well, what I've been suggesting, and I'm reasonably sure we'll certainly start here, and that's to look at the last February's budget forecast.
Can we just thank my colleague Paul for coming here and being beat up a little bit?
But no problem. Going back to last February, and our current biennial budget is based on what it is, those numbers, and that which came out of that. At that point, we had debt service in that budget, still have it, to accommodate about $915 million worth of bonding. We've used up $497, so do the math. There's a little over $400 left, and I think that's where we start. Let's kind of be reasonable about this, and let's not jump overboard in terms of certainly additional debt. We'll see. We'll have to negotiate this with the governor, obviously, but I think my caucus little concerned about over a biennium jumping over that $1 billion number, and so my belief, at least, is that we'll hold within those numbers. And then with respect to Southwest Corridor, be honest with you, I don't know. We'll certainly take a look at it. I came to a forum, not an execution today, so I better be a little careful in terms of pre-promising anything. But I have come, and maybe somewhat as Representative Zellers has pointed out, I had an opportunity, I don't know, about a month or so to go to be in Berlin. A whole different culture and very heavily transit-based. And you know, it works pretty well over there, it seemed, and we're going to have to change our culture, change our habits. I'm not sure we're altogether ready for that, but it probably is, and particularly in these urban areas, the trend of the future, and I think we'd have to recognize that and you know, be somewhat visionary in these areas. So we'll give it a shot and see where it goes.
Thank you. Senator Bonner, size of the bonding bill?
Yeah, well, of course, as you know, I support Southwest Transit, and I'm pleased to hear your openness, Senator Senjum, and I hope by the end of the session we'll have moved you from open to a strong supporter. But we won't put you any more on the spot today. With regard to the size, it was actually my understanding that we did put in last year's budget enough money to carry the interest for the 775, and that is partly where that number came from. But be that as it may, I don't think it makes sense today to decide on a number. I think what we ought to do is look at the projects, look at everything that has been requested, and see where our priorities, what does that add up to, and keeping in mind the importance of jump-starting the construction industry as well as the low interest rates. And, you know, probably it will perhaps be a little higher than you might normally do it at this time because of those two factors. But again, I think it would be premature to settle on a number.
So one of the questions I want to ask is about healthcare. So I think it's safe to say that healthcare is a significant concern for business owners. We continue to unfortunately see the number of employers offering healthcare or the amount that they subsidize that for their employees diminishing. There was federal legislation, obviously, that was passed, very controversial legislation, and we will watch the courts this summer to see how some of that turns out. But one component of that was that states put together these exchanges, and the exchanges are intended to be a way that employers and individuals can go and see, compare plan designs, premium, the costs of plans, and have kind of create a marketplace. So let's put aside what happens with the final legislation, because I think we'll, with the law. But there's been a lot of, so Governor Dayton has put together a task force to look at the exchange. In full disclosure, I sit on that task force. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not Minnesota should have an exchange. Both the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce as well as Twin West in its most recent work on public policy has come out and said if there is going to be an exchange in Minnesota, it should be a Minnesota-driven exchange. If Minnesota does not have an exchange working, can't prove that by January of 2013, the federal government comes into Minnesota and sets up an exchange. And I think many of us in the business community think although we have a lot of problems in our healthcare system that we continue to work on, we've done a pretty good job in Minnesota if you look at the insured rate as one significant measure of that. So I would like to ask the question about the exchange, and if it's something that, you know, what your caucus, what your position is on establishing at least a governance structure for an exchange in this next session. So Senator Senjum.
This is honestly an answer question. It's almost right out of my league, and I wish Senator Hahn was here because he wallows in this all the time and struggles with it, as I think we all do. I will tell you, there's not much support in our caucus for this overall idea of Obamacare, and so it's a matter of, you know, you just take kind of the front end of this, the exchange, and buy into it, and in any form at all, and knowing that if you don't, the federal government's going to do it for you. We just need a lot more discussion in our caucus. I think there's certainly a trend here that we see out of chambers and others as they talk about this to move maybe towards a so-called Minnesota plan, and as we reconvene and talk about it, we'll certainly take the thoughts and advice of, again, our lead in Health and Human Services, Senator Hahn, on this. And, he's our most expert colleague, and we'll just have to see where it goes. But I wouldn't want to, you know, predict where our caucus is going to end up on this. I just know it's going to be an issue this session, and we're going to have to deal with it one way or another.
Representative Zellers.
Sure, and excuse me. I agree with exactly with the way you prefaced the question. There has to be a Minnesota solution. We have done a far better job of driving down cost, increasing care, and increasing coverage with our Minnesota model. For us to take any of the federal government's models is literally taking 5 steps backwards. So if the default is a federal plan, I absolutely agree that that's a bad idea. Now, if the Minnesota plan is federal government minus 1 or 2, that's also not a good plan for us. And to Senator Senjum's point, I would say that I would say Obamacare is about as popular as the weather today in our caucus. So leave it at that. They're no big fans of Obamacare in the House Republican caucus. I can see you're all shocked. But there's got to be a solution that at the essence is making sure that employers have the ability to help their employees maintain their coverage. A better model, I think, is the portability, that just because you work for such company, you'll keep this insurance. Rather, your insurance follows you wherever you go, not where your job sits. So I would like to see that, but to Dave's point, this is one tough nut to crack. It is not simple policy. That's why I hate health. I mean, I don't like working in healthcare, and have stayed off of it my 10 years in the Capitol. But it is something that is very important, and I don't think anybody, and I'll sit in Paul's chair, I don't think we want to default to the federal government plan either.
Are you now speaking for Paul?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And I do think the Governor Dayton's plan is a good one. And actually, we've done enough of these, I can give Paul's answer. He will say, if we're going to see Republicans and Democrats at the table together working with Governor Dayton, there will be a compact. If not, then Kurt and his caucus will have to explain to people why they didn't pass a plan.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Senator Bonnet, your caucus is...
Well, I'll only speak for my caucus because Speaker Zillers has already spoken for the House, both sides. That was very, very effective. No, you did a great job, yeah. You want to talk a little longer, however. So I disagree with my colleagues to my right. And I've been so disappointed during this whole healthcare debate that we as a nation have politicized the healthcare conversation. And, you know, was I pleased with what happened with the federal government? I have been screaming from the rooftops they should have used Minnesota as their model. I think they adopted pretty much the Massachusetts model, and we did a better job, frankly. We all know that. We had less uninsured, our costs was better. We were working with the, you know, people like the Mayo Clinic, the brilliant thinkers, Alina, who's in the room today. All of our Medica, all of our health care providers came together, and, you know, with Minnesota Care, with the working on driving down the cost based on outcomes, not procedures. We have done a wonderful job. So yes, we wished the federal government had listened more to Minnesota. But putting that aside, the healthcare exchanges are a no-brainer. Come on. You talk about portability. The key is allowing individuals to access insurance at a lower cost and with more choice. Right now, people have to choose a job based on the health insurance benefit. Is that good for citizens? That is not. Is that good for business? So we look at what happened with the auto industry, having to provide health insurance for all those workers. That was certainly one factor in making our automobiles less competitive than what was happening around the world. So the healthcare exchanges are just one step in trying to bring some balance to this equation. They're a good idea. It's not about we ought to do this to keep the federal government out of here. That's the political answer. The right answer is we ought to do it because it's good for Minnesotans, and we'll do a better job than anyone in the nation. And I'm thankful that Danette is serving on that, because she does bring a lot of experience and expertise, as do the other people. And I don't know if you know it, but actually the Senate Republicans chose not to take a seat on that panel, and so the Senate Democrats have too. And I have heard that in some of these forums, Senator Bach has said we'd be willing to take our second one out of there and ask, you know, a Senate Republican to join in, because it is important that we do this in a bipartisan and thoughtful way so that all Minnesotans can represent it. Because when only one party is at the table, then frankly, those people whose senator isn't at the table, their voice isn't being heard and not being protected. So I don't mean to go on my soapbox, but this is one where I think it's important to set the record straight on the policy.
Thank you, Senator. So I want to get through two more questions. So education. Last session, there were significant education reforms that took place, including legislation that now permits alternative teacher licensure in Minnesota as a means to close the achievement gaps in the schools. So what should the governor and the legislature be looking at this year in education, and what is it that your caucuses will be supporting to move forward on that front? So Senator St. John, let's start with you.
I never served on health care, never served in education, so here we go. My good friend and your good friend, Jen Olson, has certainly done a lot here. I guess I come back, and this may not really kind of get necessarily educating kids better over time. Sure, we're going to spend some time, and how you get there is maybe a little uncertain. But this school age shift, I think, is something that we want to get off our backs as quickly as possible, and then as you just think about this whole thing. I'd like to see us obviously trend towards maybe getting out of one of the, strangest days of my life was some early on in my Senate career. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and we were voting on the so-called standards, and it was 59 pages long. I think it was a science and math standard or something like that. And I was supposed to vote on that because that was going to be the standard of education going forward for our kids in schools. And it was Steve Kelly said, just trust me, And why don't we leave this up to the school boards? Why can't somehow we detach ourselves a little bit, and frankly much more than we have to the current point in terms of trying to run schools. I didn't run for the school board. I ran for state senate, and I go to these forums and time in and time out. I'm asked to comment on these school policy issues, i.e., how do we get more out of our teachers? How do we get more out of our administrators? How do we get more into kids? And it just seems to me there's people in Rochester, Minnesota, Eden Prairie, wherever we are, that can do that far better than I can. So the answer, just whatever we can do to move the state of Minnesota from the standpoint of educational policy back into the school districts, that's what I think we ought to do.
Representative Sellers, and we are running short on time.
All right, I'll answer real quickly then for Paul first so I can have a chance to rebut. I think that Kurt and his caucus need to explain to the voters and the taxpayers of the state why they borrowed from our kids to balance the budget. That should be the #1 focus in our session. Now I'll rebut. I think the 3 things that were really important, and one that you really don't see and a lot talked about, is the January 15th deadline. So that if the adults in the room cannot get to agreement on the contract, the kids in the school is not penalized financially after that January 15th deadline. Principal and teacher evaluation, again, full disclosure, my wife is a public school teacher, so patching teacher evaluation is a dangerous game at home. But if you're a good teacher, you're not afraid to be evaluated. The last thing I would say, there's 2 things that we learned from Jeb Bush when he came up here last spring. Having kids be able to read by the 3rd grade and not have a social promotion, and then teaching the entire school district how to teach kids to read. One of the things they found in Florida, and you want to talk about being in the basement and trying to climb your way out, they were very far down. Making sure that the janitor, making sure the gym teacher, making sure the math teacher was able to teach kids how to read wherever they were during the day was one of the 2 things that they found probably helped them climb out of the cellar as quickly as they have and are continuing on. So those would be 2 reforms that I would like to see not only we work with, and I'm very proud to serve on a lot of these bills with my senator in reform, Senator Bonoff. She's done yeoman's work and just really carried a lot of water, not only for school reform, but for us families that are school choice.
Senator Bonoff, quickly.
I will be quickly, and I would like to compliment Senator Senjum because his style is one of humility. He says, "Oh, I'm not good at that. I'm not good at that." But Senator Senjum, when you were elected leader, we all cheered because we know what you bring to the work that you do is a very pragmatic and thoughtful and wise approach. So don't sell yourself short on the details. With regard to reform, we got the race to the top for early childhood. That is pretty darn exciting and really comes from years of work in this area. And so one thing that I would hope is that we work with the administration to make sure those dollars are spent in the very best way to particularly address at-risk early learners. And then the reason why the principal evaluation and the teacher evaluation are so very important is because it is my vision that each and every child in our state has the very best teacher they could possibly have and are led by principals who are passionate about that goal. And so I would concur with Representative Zellers and do thank Representative Zellers for the work that he's done in that area too. So
Thank you.
that would be my priority.
So what, I know you guys hate it when we try to do this too, but yes, no,
Thanks everybody
maybe.
for coming. Really appreciate it.
Yes, no, maybe. Yes, no, maybe a stadium. Yes, no, maybe. Representative Zellers. And I'm giving you an out with the maybe.
Maybe, but it depends on a lot of people getting a lot of things in order in a short amount of time.
Okay, so pessimistic.
I'm neutral.
Okay. Sanjay.
Probably no today. I don't think the votes are here today. You know, that's the legislative process going forward, and then we maybe get to a maybe.
Senator Bonnet.
Well, it's interesting. Senator Sanjay and I are on the working group, so I can tell you that I think the fact that Speaker Zellers is the maybe is the big issue, and so we're going to have to work strongly with Speaker Zellers and see if we can't come up with something that would be the best deal for the taxpayers, but would allow the Vikings to stay in Minnesota.
All right, I want to thank all three of you and Representative Thiessen, who had to leave, for being here today. Thank you very much for your leadership. So just quickly, I do have just a couple announcements. That time of the year again, well, you want to mark your calendars for the Twin West 27th. Oh my gosh, the 27th annual gala on Friday, March 9th here at the DoubleTree. Now, if you have a couple moments right outside, there are some outfits for ballroom dancing. So if you look for your gala outfits, you can stop by there and check them out. So please go ahead. This year's theme is, just 1 minute please, folks, just 1 minute. This year's theme is Dancing Under the Stars. Enjoy gourmet, sweet, and savory selections by some of the finest restaurants and caterers in the Twin Cities. So please go ahead. We also have the R Factor Band is going to be with us this year, and proceeds do go to benefit the Twin West Chamber of Commerce initiatives, as well as the Chamber of Commerce Foundation Scholarship Fund, which is a very important initiative for Twin West. So if you purchase your tickets by this Monday, you save $10 a ticket. Buy 10, get 2 free. And so, again, please contact Twin West if you'd like to buy those tickets. Thank you again to all of our sponsors. Have a great day and a fabulous weekend.